Okay.
Started shortly.
We have about 50 seconds before our intro starts to roll.
You got a summer cold?
So what?
No, here lately, I just been having sinus drainage. Every
Sinus,
morning when I
yeah.
wake up, my eyes are watering and my nose is running.
Yeah, I've had it too.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and then by the end of the afternoon, I'm fine. It's just all morning.
My wife said it rained in Jonesboro last night. I'm down here in Little Rock, but she
It
said it
did.
rain up there.
Oh yeah,
It did. It was so wonderful. I slept so good because of that rain.
we got a good one in.
Mhm.
Well, we are moving and I'm downsizing and I don't have to cut the grass anymore. So I'm glad to see the rain and not worried about the grass growing.
I would be too. It's one of the perks of apartment life. We have about 20 seconds, everyone. Five seconds. Good morning, good morning, K102.5 FM. Welcome to Community Conversations. I am Allie J. Tabor, joined by Mr. LaGanzi Kale and our guest for today, Senator Dan Sullivan. Before we get started, I want to go ahead and read the disclaimer, because if I don't, then I will forget. KLEK 102.5 FM and the Voice of Arkansas Minority Advocacy Council does not endorse, support, or oppose any issue, topic, public official, or candidate for office. The content in the stream is provided for educational purposes and keeping citizens informed. We will not tell you how to vote. We will not tell you who to vote for, but we do encourage you to get out there and make your voice heard and vote.
And of course, don't forget
With
election
that
day.
being said,
And don't forget election
go
day.
ahead.
I just about election day is November 8th, and early voting begins October 24th, and the last day to register to vote is October 8th. So, Senator, always a pleasure to have you on. So, gonna start off a little different this time, because I'm sure most people know who you are. But what is during your current term in the state senate the accomplishment that you're most proud of?
Sure. Well, thank you. And again, pleasure to be here. I have an opportunity often to be on with the people and viewers and listeners at KLEK, and I appreciate that. I served 3 terms in the Arkansas House. Those are 2-year terms. And in my first term in the Arkansas Senate. And because of the census, this term is only a 2-year term. Generally, a Senate term is 4 years. So at the end of this election in November, whoever is elected will come down here to the Capitol and we will draw for a 2 or a 4-year term. And we'll decide at that point whether whoever has the Senate seat serves a 2 or a 4-year term. Had a number of issues I was glad to be a part of. You know, and some things you're glad to be a part of. I'm not necessarily proud that we had to fight some of these fights, but COVID was very difficult on people. And the battle that we had within the state, even when people agree on things, was very difficult to manage through that. Our businesses closed, our schools for a large part were struggling with kids being out of school, kids being in school. Teachers struggled with having to do online courses. Those were all difficult. And working through that was a hard thing. I think one of the things I was fortunate to do was work with a group of people who wanted to follow a model that kept our schools open for in-school learning. As many of your listeners know, we had a battle with the governor when the governor said he can do anything he wants under a COVID, under an emergency order. He can do whatever he wants for as long as he wants without any legislative input. That was a very difficult battle that we had. We had businesses coming to me going, Dan, we're about to close. You know, this level 1, if your listeners remember that, level 1, you had to stay a distance apart, you had to be masked, you had to do all these things. And we had the businesses, particularly restaurants, had to be at 1/3 capacity. They just couldn't make any money. Many of them were not set up for drive-through at that time. They now are, but they weren't back then. And we saw a number of our smaller businesses close while our large businesses, corporate businesses, stayed open. That was a difficult time. The governor eventually, that lawsuit went to court. It was going to end up in the Supreme Court. The governor eventually signed legislation that I co-sponsored that agreed with the lawsuit and said there has to be legislative input, that the governor doesn't have unlimited power for an unlimited time. So that was the most difficult thing to work through. Again, I don't know if proud would be the word I would use because it was hard for a lot of people.
Okay, and Senator, so if you are reelected to another term, what are some of the things that you hope to accomplish?
Well, work along those same lines to return power to the people. Our government has gotten really huge at the federal level and the state level, and individual freedoms and individual responsibility don't have a difficult place. My opponent and I really have a conflicting worldview of what direction we need to head in. And I think she identifies as a progressive, and that when you look at the agenda of the Progressive Party, that is more government control, bigger government. I tend to completely disagree with that and want to make sure that we have and retain those individual freedoms, whether that's in school, whether that's in business. Transportation and our fuel costs are a big part of that. We've seen inflation just jump tremendously. And the cause of inflation is always government. It's the government handing out more money. And when that happens, then dollars are inflated. And essentially that works as a pay cut for everybody, for teachers, for the employees everywhere. And so we're going to have to fight this inflationary trend. And it's going to come down to not promoting government spending in the form of incentives and increased taxes. I think my opponent is going to likely push for increasing taxes. So those are some of the things that I'll be working on. As a matter of fact, today, I'm meeting with a group of farmers over dicamba. Farming is the largest industry in our state. And many people are fighting this battle with dicamba because it's killing some of the people's gardens. It's affecting our forests. Also meeting later today with the School Safety Commission. Have another conference call later today with a company that is working on saving energy bills, saving households energy bills with other kinds of alternative energy sources, which are a great idea. And we need to figure out how to work with those people. I met yesterday with a state agency called ADVA and a gentleman named Phil Fletcher. And I think, Laganza, you've had Phil on your show before. Phil is out of Conway, Dr. Phil Fletcher. He has developed a great model for working with homeless to take them from our shelters into a non-congregate setting, into rental facilities, and eventually into home ownership. And they work with them on finding jobs and saving money, mental health. Phil essentially has a plug and play model called Hope Village, and people can look that up if they want, in Conway. And we met with Phil yesterday to see if we can bring that same model to Jonesboro and then to other regions of the state. Again, to help our homeless population, to help our veterans. We had the Veterans Village there in Jonesboro that does some of these similar things. Well, if we have these programs and we have people that know how to operate them, then essentially, again, we have a plug and play. And let's get these groups together and figure out what we can do to put that same model into Jonesboro. And I'll jump back with dicamba. A gentleman named Stan Jones is a leader in our state, has been for years, large farmer. And Stan recognizes the impact that dicamba has on our general environment here in Arkansas. Dicamba is a great product and a great tool for preventing pigweed in our soybeans and crops. However, it's doing damage that was unintended. And so we have to bring people together to try to solve these problems. And that's what Stan has trying to do, coming to me. And later on at 3 o'clock today, we have scientists coming from all over the United States, Mississippi, I think UA, LR, UA, I don't know if UMS is going to be there, University of Arkansas, scientists that are going to be there to help us work on the science of dicamba and figure out how we can work together to allow the farmers to have the product they need, but also to protect the citizens of our state and the other environmental factors that are going on. You know, we hear a lot right now about transgenderism and schools, but what we as senators deal with is so much more broad than that. And I've tried to list a few of those examples and what I'm doing right now, even today, to address those issues.
So I have a question for you. What are your plans to attract more jobs to the NEA area?
More jobs? Well, that's what we're working on right now. I think this Envirotech is a company that makes electric vehicles. You know, they moved into Osceola, Northeast Arkansas. A lot of people that work in those plants, a steel mill, probably the largest investment the state has done in the steel mill over in Osceola. A lot of those people live right here in Jonesboro, and they'll spin off of those jobs to other things. Some of the greatest impact we've had. I think bringing in more, you know, I think the mayor is working on the trail system, walking trails and improving our local environment for people. Those are all things that are going on right now. Of course, I think one of the biggest things to bring jobs is lowering the tax rate. Again, a completely different view that my opponent has. When you look at the research, businesses come into locales that have low income tax. And right now we are competing with Tennessee and Texas and Louisiana and Missouri for people to come into our community. Right now, these industries are seeing what our trend is in Arkansas to lower that income tax. Again, a big difference between my opponent and me. If that's what attracts businesses, and the progressive idea is to raise taxes, we're going to see businesses leaving our state rather than businesses coming to our state. It's one of the reasons that we came into that special session and moved the tax rate that was passed anyway, that would have taken effect in July of 2023. We just moved that forward a little bit, several months, to put money back in the pockets of the people. Take money out of the pocket of the government and put it into the pockets of the people. But probably the biggest single thing to address your question, and the biggest difference between my opponent and me, is proven that lowering income tax brings businesses into your state. Look at Florida, look at Texas, look at Tennessee, look at our surrounding states. That's what they do. That's what we're doing, and I'll continue to work on that.
Yeah, Alan, did you have another question? If not, I have one.
You go ahead.
Okay, so Senator, this is a question that we always ask candidates that are running for the higher state offices, but I'm going to ask you this also as a senator. So if you are reelected to a term and there are more Democrats or other parties elected, even to the constitutional officers of the state, which is the governor, lieutenant governor, all those, how will you work with those who you may not necessarily agree with politically to get things done for the state?
Oh, yeah, good question. You know, I, as a matter of fact, met with a young lady, she's a state rep in the state house representatives. We had something we wanted to work on with ASU. She's an ASU grad. And I asked her if she would like to co-sponsor that bill. And she agreed to. So, I think people see the back and forth that goes on locally between my opponent and me. I've been labeled as called a lot of names by her, not just by, I understand that by the constituency. But when she labels me as, the things that she does, that I'm an extremist and I'm this and I'm that, if you were down here in Little Rock and saw the exchange that I have with our fellow legislators on both sides of the aisle, it's a lot different. We work with each other every day. Our Senator Clark Tucker and I are on the ethics committee right now, working on some very, very difficult things that you probably run that story or talked about that story. These are some difficult issues. And that ethics commission is made up of 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats. And we came to consensus on those issues and had a true finding on 2 Republican senators on an ethics violation. We have one coming up now that's been filed on a Democrat senator. And we will work in that venue with those people, with the Democrats and across party lines, to do what's right. And I was picked by the leadership of the Senate to work on that because they believe that I do things right and I work for the truth. And I really hope that we can reduce this rhetoric, of calling me a fascist and an extremist and, I hate teachers and I hate women. That's what's coming out from my opponent. I expect that from the constituency, and I'm sure my constituents are name calling her. But we have to stop with between us.
And yes, there is definitely been name calling on both sides, and some on the right have called her a purple-haired freak. But again, Kaylee K, we don't get into.
Wait a minute. She called herself that. That's what she labeled herself. And I agree. We're gonna get that from constituencies. That's part of the game. No big deal. I understand it. I haven't done that. Well, she's called fascist and extremist and other things, but she called herself a purple-haired freak, has a couple of times, and she's proud of that label, and that's fine.
Well, again, she's not here to actually counter that, but hopefully you guys will be in a setting. I know that we did attempt to host a debate on here that will not be taking place, but maybe in a different form you guys can debate each other. And it's okay, Kate, we will happily be there. But you mentioned the teachers, Senator, and of course last time we had you on, this was going up to the legislative session in which the tax cuts were passed, and there were several teachers that was wanting raises, and your position was to wait until the next legislative session to look at the budget. Is that something that you still plan on working on, trying to find a means with the permanent budget to give those educators a sustaining and lasting raise?
Yeah, absolutely. We've made that case, but I'll expand on that. Part of the case I made, it didn't come out very well, I guess, but school districts are the ones that allocate the funds. The legislature, that's not what we do primarily. We do impact those funds, but the funding for schools is a funding matrix. It's not a spending matrix. The local school board controls how the money is spent. And I don't know if you've seen it, but a number of school boards have decided to give teachers significant raises. Here in Little Rock, the local school board has upped the pay, I think the minimum pay to $46,000 or $45,000. We saw several districts around the state use money they have now, not federal money, not new money, money they have now. They use that money to give raises to teachers. So my advocacy for teachers going to the school board and holding their local school board accountable for funding has proven true, that school boards can reallocate and reprioritize funding and give more money to the teachers. We've also seen a number of school districts across the state who gave bonuses to their teachers to create that bridge until January when we can do that. And I think my record on education and supporting teachers is clear. I've supported every bill that's come down the pipe to do that. As a matter of fact, if you'll check the records, we passed legislation It has now came through the Legislative Council to work with public employees insurance. We've given them the best insurance plan they have had in a long time and lowered their premiums significantly for better coverage. I think we passed that 2 weeks ago. It's legislation that was worked on in a bipartisan manner. The Democrats and the Republicans worked on in a bipartisan manner to lower the insurance rate. So I think if one does an honest look at the record, one can't come out and say, well, Dan Sullivan didn't vote for this bill or didn't vote for that bill. What you say is Dan hates teachers. And if you say it loud enough and long enough, it kind of gains traction. That's what happens. But we will give teachers a significant raise and be competitive with our region. I can tell you my vote will be there, and I will work with people on both sides of the aisle to make that happen.
All right. As we get ready to get towards the end of the interview, is there anything else that we did not cover that you want to touch on?
Sure. Well, just I'd like, there's been a lot of rhetoric about, again, most of it has been around, and I know my constituents are the same way, so I'm not labeling either group that, but most of the rhetoric has been about who hates who and who doesn't like who, and they won't do this. I'd like to see my opponent come out with legislation that she's going to pass. My record is transparent. You can look on the legislative webpage and find every bill that I voted for or against. I'd like to see my opponent come out with what actual policies. I'm going to support this constituency, that constituency. So what does that mean? What does that look like? What about our farmers? What about the escalating price of fuel? Is she going to help increase gas taxes, lower gas taxes? Are we going to have rebates on electric vehicles, and incentives on electric vehicles? We have a local politician right now who's running for city council who wants to mandate that car dealers sell a certain percentage of their vehicles have to be electric vehicles. And is my opponent going to support those kinds of things? I think it's time to come out with some very specific ideas and what you're going to support and what you're going to oppose.
All right. And I'm sure that she's watching or someone will watch and relate it to her. So any campaign events coming up anywhere in which people can find you? Also, I saw that you were promoting the NAACP event, so we can talk about that, but any places in which people can meet you, talk to you, or support you?
Yeah, sure. Just reach out by phone to me on Facebook, and I try to meet with a lot of people. 4 meetings today, I think 4 or 5 again tomorrow, with individuals and constituents that need to meet. Yesterday I was at the Mount Zion Church. Jamal Carter invited me to that, so I met with all the folks there. I'm always available to come to meetings and see people and talk. It's what I do and what I enjoy doing. So if they want to meet with me, just give me a call, shoot me a text, reach out by email. I'll be glad to meet.
All right, Allie, did you have anything else?
I do have one final question that I want to ask. In your opinion, what do you think is the #1 issue that's facing Arkansas today?
Well,
And how do you plan to address it?
bouncing back from COVID, inflation just eating our people up. Our businesses are closing. It's a 10 to 20% cut in pay for people. People can't afford to drive to work. And yet we continue to put more regulations on the people and continue to do things that increase inflation. The billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar bailout, our student loan is going to hit and cause inflation to skyrocket here in another few months. And if we in Arkansas are not doing things to put money back into people's pocket, which means cutting taxes, then they're going to continue to fight with those. Our hospitals are struggling right now. We have hospitals around the state that are looking at closing or shutting down services. And you ask, why is that? It's inflation. And the things that we're doing that are inflating the cost and cutting salaries for people, it wasn't just teachers that took a hit to their salary. It was our police and our fire, our emergency people, that you go to the store, you fill up your tank. It's just really difficult. That's the biggest thing facing us. So what's the solution? Put money back in the pockets of people and let people decide how they want to do it. Does that answer your question or go in the right direction?
Yes, sir, it did. Thank you.
You know, I was asked the other day in a meeting, what are we going to do with the surplus? And who are we going to subsidize? And who are we going to give money to? And my answer is, I want to subsidize the taxpayer. Let's put money back in their pocket. Let them decide how to use it, rather than us down here in Little Rock deciding where that money goes and how it'll be used.
All righty. And with that, we thank you so much, Senator. Always a pleasure to have us on. And don't forget, Kayla Cannon, the voice of Arkansas Minority Advocacy Council, endorse, support, or oppose any candidate for office. We provide these interviews for informational purposes only, but as always, we are going to encourage you to exercise your right to vote. Election day is November 8th. Early voting will begin October 24th, and you have until October 8th to register to vote. But don't wait until then. Go ahead and get it done right now. Continue to watch KLEK, watch all other local media outlets, follow the candidates on their social media so you can look them up, see where they stand on the issues, and then step into that voting booth and make your choice known. All right, as always, thank you so much, Senator, and you guys have a great,
My pleasure. Thank you.
blessed day. This is KLEK 102.5.